Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the CEB Wealth Management Conference entitled Building a Digital Foundation for Wealth Management call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. If at any time during the call you require assistance, please submit your questions to the Q&A box on the web. This event is being recorded for replay purposes and may be made available on CEB member websites. Please contact virtual events at cebglobal.com with questions. I will now turn the call over to Ms. Kristen Cressman with CEB. Please proceed.
Great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's CEB Tower Group webinar sponsored by Agreement Express, Building a Digital Foundation for Wealth Management, Improving the Client Experience with Agile Client Onboarding. My name is Kristen Cressman, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Before I get started, if you need assistance logging into the webcast, please call CEB Virtual Events at 571-303-1033. You can also put something in the Q&A box, and we are monitoring that if you have any immediate things we can answer there for you. Our presenters today are Darrin Courtney and Mike Gardner. Darrin Courtney is a Principal Executive Advisor in CEB's Financial Services practice, specializing in wealth management. He advises executives on their most pressing challenges, focusing on both business and technology initiatives via strategy sessions and hosted networking events. His research advisory areas include tools that enhance advisor and client collaboration. Mike Gardner is the CEO of Agreement Express. He has led Agreement Express to become one of the most respected onboarding automation platforms in the financial services industry. Since joining the company in 2005, Mike has evolved the platform into an onboarding solution trusted by Fortune 500 organizations around the world. If you have questions for the presenters during the presentation, please use the pull-down chat box in the upper right-hand corner of the content viewer. All questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. A PDF copy of today's presentation slides and a replay link will be sent to all attendees later next week. And with that, I will turn it over to Darrin to get us started.
Thank you, Kristen, and thanks everyone for joining us today for our webinar. I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about building that digital foundation for wealth management and how that applies to kind of agile client onboarding. And I'm also looking forward to hearing from Mike and seeing some real life approaches that can help firms tackle that. To kind of start off, I'd love to give a little bit of a market overview of what we're seeing around the digital experience and what wealth firms are trying to do to enhance that, especially as it relates to onboarding. And I'm going to try and tackle that from three different angles this morning, or this afternoon, rather. First, I'd like to look at kind of the increased need for customer centricity. So obviously, when you think about the digital platforms and what's going on in the world, you know, when you think of what wealth management firms are trying to do, we're obviously trying to make things more competitive and better for our clients and meet their needs. So we'll talk a little bit about that need to kind of focus on customer centricity on the digital platforms and the wealth experience. But then we'll transition into talking about advisors, because advisors are also customers, and in many cases, in many business models, the advisor is probably your most important customer. So, you know, what are firms doing, to try and help them? What are their obstacles? What kind of competition and challenges are they facing, and how are firms, going to support that? And then talk a little bit about how firms need to become more agile, agile in the way they approach the digital platform, agile in the way they do technology rollout in general, and how they partner with vendors in the space to kind of become much more agile when they're rolling out these solutions. So to jump right in, when it comes to the client, the reason firms are struggling a little right now is that clients are looking for something completely different than they might have been 10 or 15 years ago. They really want these kind of holistic wealth management relationships. They're expecting a lot more from their wealth advisors, which is a benefit when it comes to competing with some of the emerging tech and other solutions that are out there. The problem is, as you can see, most folks are only getting, they're not getting advice on their entire financial situation, even though that's what they want. And what we're also seeing is kind of, I don't know if it's a correlation or not, is that clients are also becoming a lot less loyal in the sense that they're not giving the majority of their assets to one wealth manager anymore. As you can see here, it's about a 50-50 split, with half the folks giving the majority of their assets to one wealth manager and half giving less than the majority. And why that's important is that we're seeing that shrink fairly rapidly. A couple of years back, it was about 68%. A few years before that, it was in the 70s. So clients have become a lot less loyal in the sense that they have a lot of opportunity to work with many different wealth managers in the field. So you can see here 69% of the clients that we surveyed are consulting at least 2 or more financial institutions to receive personal financial guidance. And when it comes to younger clients, and I use that term loosely as I fall into this Gen X category, almost a third, almost 3 out of 10 or so of Gen X and Gen Y clients are using 4 or more financial institutions. So they could be working with 4 or 5 different financial advisors. And to make matters worse, they probably have an app on their smartphones or tablets, and they can compare those institutions side by side. When we look at, kind of loyalty and what's kind of driving this, the majority of folks do not think it's all that difficult to just leave their financial institution. In fact, only about 7% think it would be difficult or very difficult to leave their wealth management firm. The good news, I guess, is that 51%, or almost half, or a little more than half, are not at all likely to leave their wealth management firm in the next year, but almost half are at least slightly likely, with, a solid 23% or so, moderately, if not almost certain, to leave. And when we ask people, well, where are you going to go? If your advisor were to leave, where would you go? About half, 49%, would work with a new advisor at their current firm, which is good news. But 30% are going to follow that advisor. They're going to follow that advisor and go work at a new firm. And interestingly, 20% would work with a new advisor at a new firm. So they're kind of saying, well, here's my chance. My advisor's leaving. I'm not really sure if I'm happy with them. Not really sure if I'm happy with the relationship I have at my firm. Maybe I'll see if there's anything else out there. So a good 20% are heading to a new advisor and a new firm. To make matters worse, the more digital someone is, the less loyal they are. So we went out and we looked at folks who describe themselves as technologically savvy. So the folks who are more technologically savvy, are the more likely to consult 3 or more financial institutions for personal financial guidance. Not only are they more likely to contact multiple advisors, the more technologically savvy they are, the less money they're probably going to give to one wealth management firm. You can see here only about 55% of their wallet share goes to their primary wealth management firm. So it's becoming really important that firms start meeting client needs. And one of their needs is a digital experience. As you can see here, almost all of us own a smartphone, own a laptop, own a tablet, and almost 31% of us actually are using some kind of wearable. We like to play a game at CEB in our meetings where we ask people how many devices they have on them at that moment. Usually it's about 3 or 4 devices that are on a person's, in their possession during those meetings. And the problem is that the world is kind of becoming Amazonized, as one of our executives had put it, in the sense that in all other aspects of their life, your clients are much more digital. They're using the web, they're using social media, they're using it in every aspect of their life. So if they're out to buy a TV, they're going to go on, down to Best Buy, look at TVs, and then they're going to come home and go on Amazon and see if they can find a better price somewhere. Or vice versa. Maybe they'll go on Amazon, read all the reviews, find the TV that looks best for them, and then head down to Best Buy, see if they can get a price match, throw it in the car, and drive it home. As one of the heads of wealth management firms that we deal with said, we've become a commodity industry where each of us differentiates using a very high cost, hopefully very high value add distribution system. Every other industry where that's been true in the last 20 years has been Amazoned. I can see how that could happen to us. I can't figure out how it would happen, but I can't imagine it not happening. So I think firms realize that the digital imperative is upon us. when we go out to clients, you can see the need for digital interactions and making online or mobile channels their primary channel for doing a lot of what they like to do at wealth management firms has increased tremendously, whether it's accessing accounts and products or accessing news and insights or even tracking their progress towards their financial goals. The majority of clients want to do this digitally and online. Even things like over here on the right, like obtaining financial guidance, still most people want to do that with their advisor, but that number has almost doubled in the last few years. And if it happens, and if this trend continues, more than half of your clients are going to want to obtain financial guidance through digital channels and online. That's not to say there's not a role for the advisor, but that advisor needs to be digital, and they need to be digitally powered so they can collaborate with those clients. And so firms are getting it when we ask them what they're focusing on when it comes to their digitization or digitalization strategy in the next few years. The majority of them are focusing on improving customer access. So they get it, and as one senior executive said at the bottom here, simplicity is winning today. End clients are drowning in information and features, and they're crying for simplicity. They're embracing streamlined, efficient simplicity in the digital environment. And we certainly see that when it comes to onboarding. Clients want to be able to onboard seamlessly and smoothly and quickly, and many firms aren't quite there yet, which kind of leads us to the advisor section. So advisors are desperately looking for firms to help them, help their customers and have this smooth experience. And they're getting hit from kind of all angles in this current environment. So we know, as we talked about a little earlier, our clients want this kind of holistic advice approach. They want advice on all aspects of their financial life. And we also know that the advisors who do a better job at delivering that holistic advice are actually more technologically savvy and heavier tech users than the average advisor. So advisors get it, so the advisors who are going to be around 20 years from now, 10 years from now, who kind of are meeting that kind of new need of clients, understand they need to be more digital. And one of the problems that they're seeing is they also are starting to, deal with new competition. So not only are they dealing with, the advisor across the street, they're dealing with emerging fintech firms like the Robos, as you can see above, the Betterments and Future Advisors and Personal Capitals of the world. And what you're noticing now, though, is that in the past, there wasn't that much interest in the Robos, and it was kind of how, they're going to take on Wall Street, they're going to disrupt. I don't think most of us think that the robo-advisors are a true threat to banks and brokerage firms and wealth managers. Most of them are struggling to become profitable. But what's interesting is if you look at here, this line is tracking kind of the Google searches on the word robo-advisor, and they've cranked up tremendously over the last couple of years. But now the headlines tend to focus on big banks trying to beat robo-advisors by joining them or launching their own solutions. And you can see below the Charles Schwabs and the Fidelities and the Vanguards of the world are already outpacing those fintechs with assets under management. A lot of the larger wires are creating their own solution or partnering. So advisors need to differentiate on more than just asset allocation as they try and compete with these kind of emerging threats. And one of the things that those robos do, even though they're probably not going to be a true threat to most firms, they do expose huge gaps in our technology and how they can easily open up an account and fund an account, as opposed to most of our firms where it can take weeks and sometimes even months to open an account. So that rapid onboarding of the robos is causing a little bit of a rift for advisors, because they're dealing with clients who can say, well, I just opened up this personal capital account in 10 minutes. Why is it taking you weeks to get these accounts established? So onboarding is definitely becoming an area of focus when it comes to the digital experience. Unfortunately, when we went out and surveyed executives, to tell us a little bit about their kind of online digital experience, how the client website looks and the portal looks today, some of the things that we asked them about, most firms aren't doing very well at. So when it comes to things like ease of executing transactions online, only about 41% of the firms we surveyed felt they were very good or excellent at doing that. And down below, probably the more important stat, when it comes to the applicability of online capabilities to interactions with advisors, only about 3 out of 10, about 32% felt they were very good at that. And that's going to become really important, because The robo solution, although in the mass affluent world has a space, when you get into high net worth, ultra high net worth clients, the advisor is still going to play a major role in that. So you need kind of a collaborative digital experience, and you need better digital tools. And we see that this kind of holistic experience that clients are looking for is driving an increased focus on technology. So when you look at a solutions-based sales model as opposed to the former kind of historical transaction-based sales model, advisors that are solutions-based, much heavier CRM users, portfolio management, client reporting, financial planning, even managed accounts, anything that's kind of bringing that client and advisor together to talk about goals, to talk about client needs, much more usage. Even ECM and BPM over on the right side are starting to see more focus. So solutions-based advisors realize they need to use these tools. The problem is those tools aren't considered particularly effective when we kind of went out and surveyed market managers and said, well, how good are these tools for your advisors? Portfolio management, financial planning, about half of them are saying they're effective. When it comes to BPM or ECM or other tools that can help with that onboarding experience, most managers don't think that, the vast majority don't think that technology is effective at the moment. So there's a lot of room for improvement there. So not only do advisors not have the best technology in the world when it comes to onboarding and BPM, ECM issues, not only are they competing with threats from robo-advisors and others that are exposing their technological gaps, they're also having to deal with an increased regulatory environment and a much tougher environment in the sense that not only do they need to improve their skills and differentiate on more than asset allocation and get more into holistic advice and planning and use all these different technologies, they also need to start, kind of protecting themselves and protecting their firm and making sure that they're showing that they're doing what's in the best interest of their clients. And that's due to regulatory reform all over the globe, whether it be Australia, Canada, the UK, the US, whether it's FOFA or CRM2 or DOL, most of these all kind of boil down into you need to be doing what's in the best interest of your client. You need to be disclosing any fees. You need to be disclosing any conflicts. You need to make sure your clients are aware of these conflicts. So a lot of firms are turning to technology, including onboarding technology, as a way to make sure that they check the box and that they distribute what they need to distribute for clients and get their BIC agreement signed or whatever they need to do up front. And so when you combine all of these things, advisors don't have that much time in their day anymore because they have to make sure they're compliant and they have to make sure that they're getting the information they need and they have to make sure that they're having more holistic conversations with their clients. So as they spend more time on services and compliance activities like just making sure that they're distributing the proper forms, getting the right signatures, knowing their customers as they onboard them, that gives them less time to actually interact with their clients or deliver the holistic advice that clients want or find new clients that they can help. When you automate this technology, however, you can get some significant improvement, thus freeing up some very valuable time and getting the advisors back out in front of clients and delivering the true service that clients are looking for. And finally, that leads us to what firms need to do to become more agile in this space. We know the role of technology has changed. When we look at clients, we know that most of them kind of fall into this kind of multi-channel category on the left and the middle there. Some people just want to do everything in person still. Some people want to do everything digitally, don't want to talk to anybody, just want to do it all online. But the majority of us kind of are in that middle phase. There's some things we want to do, on the portal, some things we want to do face-to-face. But what's interesting here is even the people who want to do personal only, 88% of them own a smartphone or tablet. 90% of them are using social media. So these clients are digital. They might be using personal channels at the moment, but it's not that they're not digital capable or that they don't use digital channels. And that's why you see a big interest on technology. In 2004, it was technology was ranked 6th as far as business drivers go. In 2013, it had jumped to number 1. Technology should become extremely important for firms, so much so that Francisco Gonzalez, the CEO of BBVA, once said that BBVA will be a software company in the future as firms realize how important digitization and technology has become. Now, when we went out to wealth tech executives in our recent poll and said, what's the most important priority for your firm over the next 6 to 12 months? Obviously, regulation is very important and client reporting and things of that nature, but overwhelmingly, improving client onboarding from front to back office was their biggest area of focus. So when you think about digitization and everything that's going on, it has to wrap around client onboarding. And there's some room for improvement when it comes to their confidence level and their ability to do that. Obviously, they feel much better about it than social media or actionable data analytics, but still, only about 35% of the people we surveyed, do not feel super confident in their ability to kind of improve that onboarding and make it faster and make it more rapid. And what's driving this is client demand. Clients are seeing the robos, clients are having these experiences in other aspects of their life, and they're saying, hey, this is the kind of experience we want. We want a faster onboarding experience. We want a better digital experience. So yes, regulation is driving things. Yes, innovation from fintech is driving things, but overwhelmingly, it's that client centricity. It's meeting client needs. And probably one of the best quotes we've heard around this is from another head of wealth management for a North American firm who said, we spent $2 million with X consulting firm to develop a technology roadmap. What we got for that investment was one clear lesson: don't do it. Client demand changes too fast. Technology changes too fast. We've probably never heard of the technology that will be at the heart of our client service platform 5 years from now. All we can do is respond faster to keep up. And that, kind of a poignant message, but it's pretty clear and it's pretty accurate. And historically, I will not go through the details of this slide, but historically, when it comes to technology rollouts, we take a very long and kind of plodding approach. We plan for a long time, and we design it, and we implement it, and it takes a long time to get to that kind of value that we hope to get out of that solution. But the more we look at it, the more we realize firms are kind of struggling with that. They realize they need to be more agile. They need to be faster. But there's a warning in this as well. What we're starting to see is that line of business heads who want that speed will go out and kind of dedicate some of their own budget towards technology because they're very much willing to trade off cost, quality, even functionality for speed. So as far as they're concerned, maybe it's not the best solution, or maybe it's not the prettiest, or maybe it's more expensive than something our IT guys could have built, but I want this out tomorrow. I want to get this out the door. And which is admirable, but there's a problem with that. And the problem is that most of the stall points when it comes to a technology rollout isn't in the implementation portion. It's in the planning. And this is not to say that you have to do months and months of planning, but what it is to say is that you need to get the right people in the room up front and then partner with a vendor who can help you with an agile approach so they can get something out quickly, but you've got the right people in the room from the get-go so that as you're launching this product, as you start getting data, as you start seeing how clients are reacting to it, you can pull it down, you can make adjustments, you can change it on the fly, and you've got all the people in the room to sign off on those changes and quickly make changes to get where you want to be. Because what we're seeing is it's just throwing something out there quickly, that component speed, that levels out when you get to kind of a speed to value proposition. Whereas if you get the right people on board out of the gate and then get the right partner, the right vendor to kind of help you design a solution that can get out the door, and you can kind of use agile technology to improve it and make adjustments, you'll see much better speed to value on the speed to value curve. And then finally here, this is just some of the pitfalls. When it comes to onboarding, when it comes to digitization, most firms are really struggling. Only about 35% of the executives we surveyed actually have an understanding of how digitalization applies to their organization. Most of their employees do not understand their approach to digitization. When we asked them, about how good is your client-facing technology when it comes to enhancing the advisory experience, which is what we're all focusing on right now, only 11% thought it was effective. And probably the biggest gap is over there on the right. So most firms are still doing what they always did. So, advisors are rated very well at being accessible to their clients. So you can walk into a branch or you can get on the phone and call your advisor and they're there for their clients, which is important. But as far as engaging clients and prospects through multiple channels, having a website that ties into an advisor's technology, giving clients the choice to onboard or make transfers in the channels that they choose, that's number 43. Folks are not doing that very well. So just some quick key takeaways before I hand it over to Mike. Obviously clients are becoming less loyal, with most wealth clients having relationships with multiple wealth management firms. What makes matters worse is that the clients are becoming more digital, and the more digital client, the less loyal they become. So firms have to focus on improving the digital experience by becoming customer-centric. No doubt about that. Advisors are customers too, however, and they are also becoming much more technologically savvy. And in order to arm them with the tools necessary to capitalize on what little time they have to meet client needs in an ever more complex environment, firms need to quickly provide them with a digital experience that is going to meet these needs. And finally, firms realize this need and have prioritized onboarding to compete with emerging threats and comply with changing regulations, but they may be focused too much on either long-term projects or limited implementations. By involving the right partners early in the process and by using agile solutions, firms can approach technology in an iterative manner and thus use actual data to constantly improve their offering to clients and advisors. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike so we can see some real-life examples of how firms might want to start thinking about this.
Thank you very much, Darrin. Really appreciate that, and some great material in there, fabulous information. So just a bit of my background. I'm a 20-plus year tech veteran. I've been a part of hundreds and now nearing thousands of business transformation projects over the years. And what I have been witnessing is the success rates that are skyrocketing as Agile becomes the norm. And we used to think of Agile as really just around the engineering aspects of technology and around software, but it really has moved into the rest of business process and business transformation, and it's an important thing to understand. So let's start off with a little bit of a quick grounding. When we talk about onboarding, we don't just mean one portion of the process. We do mean the entire onboarding process. So we mean everything from data capture, the part that you would think from a website or from a digital form that a client might be working with, all the way through quality assurance and review, compliance and analysis, and even into processing and approval to ultimately you end up in the system of record. And I want to make sure that we understand that we are talking about the whole business process, not just a piece of it, because that's how your clients are thinking that onboarding, they know that onboarding affects every area of the client advisor experience, and so we have to be thinking of every area within the client advisor experience. And so what we saw in some of Darrin's presentation is the imperative for financial services to improve the onboarding for competitive advantage and, frankly, for protection. And so it's understanding the scope of that as we begin to look at, well, what can we do to reliably and successfully make a meaningful transformation of the client advisor experience. So just before we get going into detail, and I'm going to be talking generically about Agile onboarding and that process, let's just do a quick survey just to find out where the audience sits today. We're sitting with around 100 people here today. And so let's throw up a quick question. Kristen, if you could throw up our poll question. Today, if you're planning on solving the onboarding problem, how are you planning on doing it? Because it looks like everybody's got something planned. So what is it you're planning on doing? And so we're going to throw it up there, and we'll take this in real time, and I'll give you guys a chance to respond. This is where we find out if you're all awake and paying attention. The area that typically is the loser in this is we're happy with our onboarding process, so I can see that it hasn't changed tremendously yet. All right, so we're just going to close it off there, and it looks like it is almost a completely even split between scoping a BPM project, slight lead for focusing on one piece, example, new account wizard, or we're still in the research phase. And so, no surprise here. This is actually the sort of thing that we see in the marketplace. So let's move that survey out of the way. Thank you very much. All right, so look, there are, in our experience in working with all these firms, and in fact, of my years of experience in the onboarding world, is that there's two big problems with client onboarding projects. The first is when organizations try to narrow the scope of their project. And this speaks to Darrin's point on customer centricity and what are we really doing here. So the problem is when we pick one thing. So let's say that we're going to do a new account opening wizard, and we decided that that's the area that we're being capitalized on by the robos. This is where they're really taking the biggest bite out of us, or that we look the worst. And so what we do is we take that as a single project, and I'll just bite off a little bit because then I've got a higher probability of success. But the problem is that this isn't actually a customer-centric approach, because that's not your customer. That is a use case-centric approach. And the problem is that isn't going to actually satisfy the customer in our experience. We see that the client and the advisor, they want a fully centric approach for them, which means that they want to cover everything that they're touching. That's everything from new account opening to transfers to private placements to KYC updates and everything else that you can imagine or that you haven't even thought of yet. And so the problem is when we narrow things down to a single use case, yes, we might get that solution out to market sooner, and we might have a higher probability of success for that individual use case-centric opportunity, but what we don't do is actually satisfy the customer or the advisor. And hence the reason why, despite the fact that there's been technology available for this for more than 10 years of being able to transform that experience, why we don't see improvements in the customer satisfaction rate, why they still say, hey, we're not good enough. The second problem that we see in onboarding is betting on a massive BPM project. And there's a simple reason why this is why these tend to fail. And it's normally because the present is really hard to predict. What are we actually doing in our onboarding process? So if you think we have to be customer centric, so we're going to cover off a huge number of use cases, I would challenge your organizations to say that when I sit down with them, I probably can't find 10 people that would agree on what the actual business processes that are really operating within your organizations are today. So that makes that a very difficult business transformation. As Darrin points out, the planning stage becomes really difficult because you have to sit down and try to figure out, well, what are all the different elements that we might be involved? What is the actual process today, and how are we going to manage that? So that's really difficult. But now take that and add in the virtually impossible task. I'm going to now take that and I'm going to project that forward 18 months from now, because that's how long my entire project is going to take. So as I project that forward 18 months, now I also have to add in the prediction of everything that might change from a regulatory perspective, from a competitive perspective, from a market or customer expectation perspective. And with all of those things coming into play, I now have an impossible task of trying to plan and predict for what's going to happen 18 months from now. And frankly, even if you're Elon Musk, that's a really difficult thing to do. So to illustrate this, of why this is really difficult to deal with, you need to understand something, the concept of what are called desire paths. And I'm going to use an illustrative example here of the University of Calgary in Canada. So the University of Calgary built a whole new section of campus, and what they decided that they would do is that they had lots of architects and engineers and urban planners, and they decided that we would take all these people, put them together, and they would work out what would be the most efficient paths between the buildings to get to. And then they spent a whole pile of money doing that and a lot of planning, and they built all of these paths. And then, unfortunately, of course, what happened is that when they opened up that section of campus, people walked pretty much everywhere except on the paths. So they wore paths into the lawn, and it's because that wasn't the path that people wanted to take. Even though they'd spent a lot of time trying to predict where people would go, that's not actually where they went. And if you actually look, this is an actual Google view of the University of Calgary, and we've highlighted some of the paths. When they built the second section of campus, they said, you know what, let's just let people walk on the lawn, and then afterwards we'll figure out where on earth have they been going, and then we'll put paths where they actually went. And you can see just from some of them we highlighted, I mean, there's a number that we didn't even highlight, but it's clear that people they picked new paths, and these are paths that they wouldn't have predicted. And so these are called desire paths, and probably the most famous of the desire paths is actually in the technology world is actually Twitter. If you think about it, what Twitter has actually provided is just the simple concept of the hashtag with a format constraint, the 120 character constraint, and the world drives the topics that trend, not Twitter. They're not trying to predict what it is, they're just trying to put it into a format. So part of the problem with BPM is that clearly the result of BPM is that it ends up being expensive and slow and rigid and high risk, but if you really get down to the heart of it, what it really is over-engineered. It is the ultimate Swiss Army knife that's trying to be everything to everyone. And as a result of that, it doesn't actually bring enough utility to individuals along the way because it can't actually achieve the simple things that we're trying to do. This would be far too difficult. This is actually a real Swiss Army knife, by the way. Be far too difficult for you to use because it's over-engineered. And BPM projects tend to go to over-engineering. So when we start talking about Agile client onboarding, what we're really talking about, I'm just going a little faster, is that we're trying to make a meaningful transformation of the whole experience that gives you value from day one. It gets rid of that delay, but then generates meaningful data that tells you where you need to iterate and develop. And that is really the heart of Agile. The heart of Agile is a fast feedback loop that's actually giving you the information of what's important to people, where are they succeeding and where are they failing, and then allowing you to adjust very quickly to that. And if the only use case, if you're a robo and the only use case you have is this single onboarding, of course you can make that very good. But if you're a traditional institution and your customer centricity means that you're going across a whole pile of different use cases with your client, then you need to be able to take that and put that into a form that allows you to have the flexibility across every one of those pieces. You need to be able to be collecting data to be able to make those meaningful transformations quickly and easily. So, the reality is, in my experience, the only way that you can get to that is through an Agile transformation. The era of the waterfall and the epic project is really over. It is, unfortunately, in our institutions, there's still, people don't really know how to manage, haven't got their heads around managing Agile projects. But the reality is we have to move on beyond the epic and the waterfall project and move to something which is an Agile framework. So, I'm going to touch on each one of these, so that you have an understanding of what are the rules of building an Agile framework, because we're really not talking just about, Scrum or Agile methodology. We're really talking about some rules of having an Agile framework when I'm designing my projects and I'm deciding what I'm going to do from a transformation for my organization. So the first is really just to determine who you want to impact. The second is covering the whole experience, or as much of that experience as is possible. The third is starting to make a difference today, not next year or some period future from today, and then iterating based on real data, discovering your desired paths. So I'm going to talk in a bit more detail about that. So when we talk about who do you want to impact, we want you to begin by defining the problem by determining who is going to be the center of your impact. Is it going to be the client? Is it going to be the advisor? Is it going to be the back office? But whichever one it is, you need to make a meaningful transformation for their whole experience. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to inadvertently create an inconvenience. And an inconvenience is sort of the death of all technology rollouts. It's when I can do one thing on the device, but I can't do something else on the device. When I interact with you one way over the phone, but I can't do the other thing over the phone. When I interact one way with you over the computer, but I can't interact another way. And that creates an inconvenience for the client, and then ultimately the client will begin to find their own paths. They'll get off the sidewalk and they'll start walking on the lawn, to continue with that metaphor. So, how you might view your client advisor experience is in pieces and components and use cases like new account opening and account transfers and private placements. But the reality is your client or advisor views it as just the experience. So that's why you have to start by understanding, well, who am I impacting and what is everything that's going to be in their experience? The next most important aspect is making an impact today and not next year. Now, why do you want to do this? The reality is you have to get moving. It takes time to learn. The systems need to be collecting data, and real data in real time, as to what is happening. Otherwise, you're not learning when you're not moving. And for most organizations, and I know that BBVA made the point of, hey, we're going to be a software company. Well, look, most organizations that are in the financial services industry are not well suited to becoming software companies. And Darrin is right when he says that software companies are the ones that are actually going to ultimately own this. It's going to move out of proprietary technology and get into the world of software companies managing this. And so you have to get out of the software business. You've got to commit to getting out of that and letting organizations that are iterating their technology to keep up with all the changes that are happening in the technology market, along with giving you the intelligence that you need to change and adjust the technology they're providing you as the market and the data is giving you feedback. So you have to choose software that allows you to activate today. And remember that complex integrations and workflow processes aren't as urgent as you think. A lot of people think that, well, I need to get all this stuff in place on day one, otherwise I'm not going to have high utility. No, you have high utility when you take care of the entire customer experience, not when you've made a single use case really epic. So that's the important rule to keep in mind. And once you start using Agile onboarding software, then you need to make continual iterations using real business data, not just speculation. You want to make sure that you're making data-driven decisions where if I look at what are all the possible integrations, for example, that I might be able to do or I might need or I might think I need for my onboarding process to get to my multitude of back office systems, the reality is without data, I can't tell you which of those are actually most in play, which ones need the most volume, which ones take the most volume, which ones warrant having those integrations built. And it is understanding that that allows us to build valuable business cases and have successful projects. And again, if you don't have any data, then frankly, you're just guessing. And so the key is to get that data, which means if you're not in the race, you're just falling further behind. Every day that you're not collecting data around what's really happening in your onboarding process, your competition is learning while you're planning, and you're just getting further behind. And that's a recipe for disaster. You need to get off that train. So let me give you a really basic example within the Agreement Express world of what kind of information we give you to help you find your desired paths, help you iterate very quickly. So with our platform, our Agile Onboarding with Agreement Express, the day one functionality is high utility. We have the flexibility to capture the stuff that you can't or haven't yet predicted. We're covering the whole experience, and we want to give you the ability to observe data and iterate. So this is what our platform does on day one. It's what any of you could do right now or frankly before the end of even this month. And the idea is to put something in place that is satisfying and elevating your entire onboarding experience quickly and easily while putting you in a position to be successful because it's collecting data to allow you to adjust. So, for example, everything that runs through Agreement Express, the idea is that everything that you're doing in onboarding or any part of your business interaction with your client, you need to be able to put through one system, because if you're not putting it through one system, then your data is being collected in more than one area. So Agreement Express keeps all of your transactions and cases in one central searchable place. And you may not have thought of everything on day one. And if you haven't thought of everything on day one, that's no problem, because Agreement Express allows you to run not only structured transactions, the ones that you have planned, you had the ability to plan out in advance, but also the ones you didn't think of. So if you didn't think of a type of business transaction that might be done with the client, it was not on that pie chart that you had designed for your organization, you can simply drag that document in, or your advisor can do that, and now the customer is still remaining within the central world, and it's all being tracked. And that even includes things where people might just scan a document and send it to you that you just need to have the client apply their signature to and send it back, or that you have to send off to a relinquishing institution in the case of a transfer. So you really need the flexibility to do these unstructured transactions to be able to be agile. But once you've got all of that in place, you still need to be able to do structured, because you want to be able to create guidelines, pathways. With that, we want to be able to initiate more of the experience. So that might mean that you're adding in actual structured experiences, like adding legacy individual or joint accounts, or individual account opening, or corporate account, or KYC update, or all the other things that you might want to do. And this all has to become part of the structure with minimal logic on day one, so that you can begin to learn to determine those desire paths. Now, systems like this for Agile would be very worrisome if you're in the compliance department if it didn't track absolutely everything that happened. What we don't want to just have an open field of you can just send anything. That's frankly email. Email is the unstructured world that allows you to send anything to anyone at any time, to anywhere, and the problem is that it's really difficult if you're in the compliance department to be actually see what happened. So with a proper onboarding platform in place, an agile onboarding platform in place, you get a full automated audit trail of every client onboarding step, which is allowing you to determine and see what those various desire paths are. And the constraints are already in place so that nothing happens without visibility. And and incidentally, I would probably challenge a lot of your organizations today to find out whether you have that kind of visibility even today. Once you start to see what happens, the Agile platform will begin to tell you things like, hey, there was a correction needed, and how frequently was this type of correction needed, so that you don't make knee-jerk reactions or you don't over-engineer by anticipating what are the types of mistakes that are going to be made. So platforms like Agreement Express actually show that, hey, this was in the last 7 days, for example, this was the incidence of incorrect birth dates entered as discovered by our compliance group. But actually the most common error being made is incorrect social security number, and that's what's creating our not in good order, or the bulk of our not in good order circumstances or situations. So now we need to be able to adjust to that. And this is an example of the system just giving you intelligent data so that you're not sitting there going, I wonder what are the types of mistakes we're going to make, and I build that complex Swiss Army knife. I build something that actually makes more sense because it's data driven. Then you can go in and say, okay, well, we're going to add in a simple bit of logic to the template we use for that, where the people are making those mistakes. I'm going to have them just re-enter double entry of the social security number, and then I can watch and see whether or not that resolved the problem. I didn't have to over-engineer anything. I'm very sensible about it. I'm not wasting money, and I'm not wasting the firm's time, and I'm not taking a big risk in the process of doing that. So that's just a really simple example of how that happens. Now, some of the common questions that come up for us when we're talking through Agile projects is people say, well, but what about all the stuff I already do? What about all the forms and everything else that I do in my organization today? How am I supposed to deal with that? Well, the reality is, in our world, we import absolutely everything that you have knowledge of today on day one, and that's the sort of stuff that actually takes us only a few days to get it in place, is to get all of those forms and templates that you know of today in place with really basic logic so that you can start operating the system under the controls, having visibility and getting measurement very quickly in your organization. In some organizations, that's the same day, and in some organizations, that's just in a couple of weeks. And that's the foundation you start with. But the reality is we don't want to limit it to the ones that you thought of, and that's where that flexibility to add in other components and do other things becomes really important. The next question, of course, that comes up for people is, well, what about all the data that's being captured? Is that all now just trapped inside of these templates or lost in the system? And the short answer is no. All of that data that we're managing is actually captured and ready for extraction and ready for reuse in the next transaction that the client's doing. In fact, even all those cases and transactions are being organized around the clients, around their firms, around their accounts automatically without you having the malice of forethought of even to do that. And the system is just doing that so that the data can be ready for reuse. And then ultimately, when you've got systems ready for taking an integration, whether that's a simple one like a batch file upload, or whether that's a more complicated one like a real-time integration, all that data is ready for extraction or for real-time integration. So that's not lost in the process of doing an Agile project. It's just not up front. And then what about my legacy system integration? Well, as I pointed out, the data is going to tell you which ones are worth it. There is no system that really can't be integrated to. The question is it worth the effort? Is it worth the time? And oftentimes we think about what is the effort to deposit data into these systems, but we don't think about, well, what is the value of actually extracting data from those systems? And in a lot of cases where we see BPM projects going wrong or taking too long, it's because there's this desire to read the historical data out of this variety of back office systems. And in fact, there's usually two problems with that. Most of those systems weren't built with the idea of reading data from them. They were meant for putting data in. And the second problem, of course, is the quality of the data that's within those systems, which is oftentimes questionable. And of course, that means that there has to be transformations to manage that. So the more that you can actually use data to drive whether or not those types of integrations are going to be worthwhile, the better. And the important part is that the questions that most organizations are asking, even though they're planning on embarking on an Agile project, are really about trying to design the perfect path. And this is how the projects get delayed for months or years, because they're not letting the data drive the decisions. They're sitting down and they're trying to outthink the paths that people are going to walk. And that's not an effective strategy going forward. Agile client onboarding is really about setting the direction today, but building the perfect path as you go. The idea is, we often say that it's like, today your onboarding is a railroad. It has a very set direction. It has a fixed width. You know what you can put on it. You know what won't fit on it. But everything else that doesn't fit on it is still going to get processed by your organization. It's just not going to happen in a structured way. Well, that's not effective. That doesn't work for the customer. It doesn't work for your organization. What you want to be able to do is just set constraints around the pathway and be able to tell how long does it take for people to get to different points. Where are the adjustments I need to make? Where do people actually go so that I make a meaningful transformation? And frankly, that's what the robos are doing. Those are agile organizations that are adjusting on the fly based on the data that they're capturing and based on the feedback that they're getting from their client base. And that's what makes them successful. In order for you to be successful, you have to start capturing that same data. But of course, you're going to be doing that across even more paths than they're doing today, because they're limited use case organizations. And as Darrin has pointed out, and as all of the research is showing, the traditional financial services institutions and banks have actually got the upper hand against these other organizations, against the robos, because they are full service, because they can do so many more services. But if you trap those within individual use cases, then you're stuck. So the idea is that you need to make a meaningful digital transformation today, and you can do that with Agile Client Onboarding, which means sacrificing a little bit of your dream today to be having something in place tomorrow, and I can guarantee you, you will achieve all of your vision way sooner at a higher level of higher probability of success than if you tried to predict the perfect paths and you ended up over-engineering through your planning stages. So that's some of the basics of Agile onboarding and the aspects of Agile onboarding. What I'm going to do is I've left some time in here for questions. I want to hand it back over to Kristen just to give us the guidelines on the question front before Darrin and I will both be available to answer questions from anybody in the audience.
Great. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Darrin. As Mike just mentioned, it is time for the Q&A portion of our webinar. To submit a question, you can use the Q&A box that's in the upper right-hand corner of your content viewer. So we do have a few questions, and I am going to turn it back over to Mike and to start us off.
Sure. So the first question that's popped up for me is, we've already started a big BPM project internally. What can we do to make sure we get value out of the project? Well, really, my first question will be, how far down the road are you? Because part of the challenge for the big BPM projects is they are usually in the 18 to 24 month time frame, and and you're really going to be trying to technically over-engineer this because you're trying to predict where it's all going to go. My advice to you is, if you have started down that path and you are committed to it, you can't change that direction, which you'd have to be almost live in order for that to be the case that you've gone too far. My recommendation is that you just cut off scope and don't continue to over-engineer. Get the product out as fast as you can. Get the BPM portion out as fast as you can. Even though you may be predicting some areas, or you may be assuming that you're going to be having mistakes that come along the way and things that you're going to have to adjust. Capture that data and try to move to as much of an agile footing as you possibly can, even if you haven't quite got yourself to the point that you could actually run a fully agile project. Treat it like it is one, and don't try to over-engineer. All right, and I'll look for my next question. This one I actually think is for Darrin. Darrin, is convenience the most important goal for digital projects?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try and keep this kind of quick because I see we have other questions. But the short answer is no. I mean, convenience is extremely important, but it's kind of becoming table stakes. And we've done research where we looked at folks who approach digital with an approach to helping clients, attain their goal or attain confidence in attaining their goals, because clients want that holistic approach to their finances. And we compared that to firms that just offered, convenience. And I think of my own life. In a previous life, I worked for a firm. We wanted to get a mobile app out there, so we launched a mobile app, and it really didn't do anything. It just had our logo on it, but we got it out there quickly. And to your point, Mike, it caused more harm than goodwill. If the digital experience is helping the advisor and client quickly open accounts and have discussions about goals and give the services that clients want, that is valued much more and builds loyalty much more than just putting a tool out there or having something happen a little more quickly. So convenience is important, but it's got to be built around the long-term goal of meeting your clients' true needs around long-term holistic planning.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Darrin. I see the next question that's popped up. How do you apply an agile approach internally when working with third-party software vendors that apply a more traditional approach to BPM projects? Well, when we talk about the importance of planning, one of the importance of planning is actually making sure that you're aligned with the vendors that you're working with. If they are a very traditional organization and they are taking a very traditional approach to BPM, and they're not familiar with working agile, you're already making your life pretty difficult. That said, you do that through, and the approach I would be taking at that point would be to really be disciplined from my team's perspective, making sure that I'm telling the vendor, I know that we could sit here and speculate what type of mistakes people are going to make, what types of transactions or cases people are going to want to try to manage through the platform. But the most important thing to me right now is collecting real data and getting live. And you're going to have to really drive them towards the idea that you are an agile organization, that you do make data-driven decisions. You don't make speculation decisions. You make data-driven decisions. And as a result of that, you want to operate in a way that might be different from how they think. You as the client have got a lot of power to be able to tell people, this is the way that we want to operate, and this is the way that we make decisions in our organization. And sometimes that's the smart way, that's going to Agile, and we've seen that the other way too, where we've had clients that struggle with the idea of being an Agile organization. They can't resist the urge to over-engineer. So that sword cuts both ways, and so I would highly recommend though that you put the discipline on your side and just drive them to being as agile as you can. And let's see, all right. And I think, let's see, the question is, if I just wanted to, could I just introduce digital forms now at this point, and does this make a meaningful transformation framework, even for large banks with dozens of teams involved? Absolutely. Again, you got to think about your teams and your organization is not the customer. That's not the customer centricity. That's how you're structured today, and you can't think of your internal structures are going to dictate how you're going to externally work with the client. You have to make a transformation around the whole customer, and it doesn't matter how big your organization is. That's possible to do with the right platforms. And I think that takes us to the hour. So, Kristen, I think we're going to let you wrap it up.
Thank you, Mike. We are at the top of the hour and fortunately do not have any more time for Q&A. If we didn't have time to answer your question, we do have a record of all submitted questions, and we can address them with you directly via email after the webinar. As a reminder, a PDF copy of today's presentation slides and a link to the replay will be sent to all attendees late next week. If you have any immediate questions, please feel free to email Agreement Express at sales@agreementexpress.com. On behalf of Agreement Express and CEB Tower Group, we thank you so much for joining us today.